I once heard a quote that said, if sleep is not important, it's the biggest waste of time in the world. Why is sleep important? How much sleep do we need? What are the different phases of sleep? Can we get through all our phases of sleep if we wake up in the middle of the night? Today, our conversation is with the sleep doctor himself, Dr. Michael Breus. Michael is a clinical psychologist and both diplomat of the American Board of Sleep Medicine and a fellow of the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. He's one of the few psychologists in the world who has passed the Sleep Medical Specialty Board without going to medical school. Michael has devoted his entire professional career on figuring sleep out. Why is it important? We talk about the different nutrients that we may consume, we may take before going to sleep that will help us get not only good quantity sleep, but good quality sleep. Today, my conversation with Dr. Michael Breus on all things sleep. Let's go. Welcome to the Dr. Geo podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Geo, where it is my intention, my goal, and my purpose to help you improve and optimize your prostate health and live better with age. Michael Breus, thank you
How's
for
it
being
going,
on,
Dr.
brother.
Gio?
Thank you so much for being on.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. We've been friends for a long time. I can't believe that I haven't been on the show before. I'm so excited.
I can't believe it either. Honestly, it's just the interesting thing is that so many people had said yes. I have world-renowned
Yeah.
experts in, of course, prostate, but also other cardiologists and things.
Yeah.
I send an email. Some of them I know, some of them I really don't know, and they all say, "Yeah, sure, I'll be on when." I was like, "Whoa!" So I've been very fortunate that way. I wanted to get you on. You've been in my mind for a while. And I think it prompted me when you said, look, can you help my friend with this prostate issue? I said,
Yep.
oh, Michael, yes. And by the way, can you be on the podcast? Here you are.
Of course. Absolutely.
For me, Michael,
Hmm.
sleep is part of the 4 pillars
Yeah. It's a
in
big
terms
deal.
of anything related to prostate health, even prostate cancer, longevity, recovery, whatever you want to call it. Sleep is one of the 4 pillars, right?
Yeah.
And I think so the 4 pillars, what are they? They're diet, sleep, exercise, and targeted, very specific nutraceutical supplements. People say, well, how about stress? You didn't say stress. If you get these 4 things down
You're good on the stress side of things.
right, like you
Yeah.
don't really
Totally.
stress that much if you exercise, eat well,
Right.
and sleep well, and take certain
Yeah.
nutraceutical supplements. So it's
Yeah.
very important. The research is overwhelming on that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's
So
tremendous.
let's start with this.
Hmm.
What are we when we're sleeping? What are we trying to accomplish? What is it that we're trying
Right.
to accomplish in terms of the phases and things that we need to go through in terms of to get restorative, good sleep?
Well, so the way I like to think about it is it's across an evening, you really are looking for 2 major categories of recovery: physical recovery and mental recovery, right?
Hmm.
And both are occurring simultaneously, kind of, sort
Hmm.
of.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
what we know is that the different stages of sleep is where a lot of these things occur primarily. So, as an example, stages 3 and 4 sleep, or what we call delta sleep or deep sleep, is where the largest amount of physical restoration occurs. This occurs in several different ways. This is when the largest bolus of human growth hormone is emitted, which means everything gets repaired, kind of like bringing the car into the body shop, getting the dents and the dinks and the scratches kind of pulled out. Also, during stage 3-4 sleep, the trash gets taken out in the form of the glymphatic system, which is kind of the waste management system of the brain, and sort of all of the discharge from the neurotransmission of the day kind of it piles up into these things called beta amyloid and tau. And if you don't grab that and pull that out of there, it gets really crowded. It strangles the nerves, and this is what we refer to as dementia. So, those 2 things go on during stage 3-4 sleep. So you want to get good stage 3-4 sleep, right? Then there's REM sleep. REM sleep is rapid eye movement sleep. 80% of the time you're in this, you're dreaming. And for folks to really understand, dreams are emotional metabolism. Okay.
What do you mean by that?
So what I mean by that is when you're dreaming, what's happening is you're processing emotion from the day, whatever has
Mm-hmm.
happened to you during the day. And through that processing, you're moving information from your short-term memory to your long-term memory. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you process through it, especially when it's emotional information. Somebody hurt your feelings, somebody made you happy, you fell in love, whatever it is, right? So all of that gets processed through your dreams. And so that's where all of that mental restoration occurs. Stages 1 and 2 are what we call light sleep. There's important things that happen in there, don't get me wrong, but it's really the other areas are really what I tell most of my patients they should have some concern around them. Now, the
So at the
big
end of the
question,
day, at the end of the day, for good restful sleep, we need deep and we need REM. Period. End of story. But you cannot get to deep or REM without stages 1 and 2 first. Is that right?
that's correct. That is correct. And
Okay.
so you have to do kind of a dance maneuver. Like it's very specific steps you have to do to get there. So you go from wake to stage 1, from stage 1 to stage 2, from stage 2 to stage 3 and 4, back to stage 2, and then into REM. And so you have to actually follow almost that exact path in order to get there. And if you don't, you wake up in the middle, guess what? You go back to the beginning. So
if you wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and that's a big deal in my world, that happens often,
for
you
sure.
are in stage 2. You wake up to go to the bathroom.
Absolutely.
You have to start from stage 1 again.
Yep.
Doesn't matter how long that took, even if it took 1 minute.
Nope, doesn't matter.
So so there are a lot of people out there that are never getting to stage 3 and 4.
You got it. Exactly.
Wow. Okay.
Because of enlarged prostate, which is usually the first question I'm asking when somebody tells me that they're going to bathroom more than once a night. Like one time a night, I can kind of understand it, but generally speaking, that also tells me that they're in light sleep, and I probably want to do a sleep study on them because they probably have sleep apnea. And so that's usually where I find that kind of occurring. And then it usually isn't the prostate. In those types of cases, it's usually just nocturia from sleep apnea.
That's right.
So, but as a general understanding of it all, it like for people who like to use trackers, whether it's the Oura Ring or the Whoop wristband or the Garmin thing or chest strap, I don't know. There's a million of these things now.
You're gonna love it because I have them all. I
See, got the
have all the
Apple,
wearables.
right. And so, whatever you're looking at, number one, I think I heard Nate Watson, former president of the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, say this. He said he thinks trackers are good because people are thinking about their sleep. And I like that idea. I like people wanting to learn more about their health, learn more about their sleep, what their HRV is, their heart rate variability turns out to be a metric that's valuable in any specialty, whether it's urology or sleep or, whatever. I mean, everything really, gastroenterology. I mean, the list goes on and on. So, I mean, I think there's a
They
lot
could be a stressor, Michael.
Well, so I was just going to get to, there is something that we've seen now called orthosomnia, which is when people watch the data too much that it freaks them out. And then they're like, oh shit, I didn't get a score of 100 and blah, 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 blah. And so for my patients, I have a lot of them wearing devices because I treat people that are very mobile all over the world, celebrities, CEOs, those kind of folks. They're only supposed to be checking their data once a week. I can check their data as much as I want because I'm looking for trends and trying to give them updated information. But as a general guideline, I tell all of them, look, don't just upload it, but you don't need to look at it. Okay. I'll look at it for you. That's my job, not yours. And then we'll discuss it. And they actually, after a while, really enjoy that idea.
I love it. So around REM also, it's where you secrete a lot of testosterone in men. So I like it, very important. I always say that if you wake up with an erection, that's a good sign. That's a decent sign that you slept well. Now,
yes,
you don't always wake up with one. Men will still have a few and not know it. But if you wake up with one, that's a decent sign that you had good sleep. So here's what I like to do moving forward. So the goal is to reach REM and deep sleep at the end of the day, period, end of story. How
Absolutely.
long do we need to stay in
So
each
usually
section?
it's a
Mhm.
yeah, we really think of it as a percentage of the evening of or this bout of sleep, about 25% of each one. Now,
Okay.
as
So
we get older,
50% between deep and REM.
right. But that's
Okay.
for, I mean, I would say a man 18 to 45. Okay. Once you kind of get past that 45, 50 age range, we start to see deep sleep starts to slow down pretty significantly because we even have to score it differently in the sleep laboratory. So once people reach a certain age, we actually have to change the scoring criteria of their EEG waveforms because their EEG waveforms change as you age in order to capture, because otherwise it looks like they have no deep sleep, which we
Mm.
know they have some. It's just very muted, right? So, like, you have to think of it as kind of a bit of a moving target. The bigger goal, I tell people, is consistency because the water kind of finds its own sort of depth with consistency, and so being able to wake up, specifically wake up the same time 7 days a week. Like if you could do one thing to work on your sleep, it's wake up same time every single day, 7 days a week. Because what that does is that puts your melatonin on a very regularized schedule
Mm.
where it knows when it's going on, when it's coming off, when it's going on, when it's coming off. And that becomes very important because then what happens is everything else starts to work better and you will get the exact amount of deep sleep that your body needs and the exact amount of REM sleep because you're in your zone, if you will, for sleep. Now, it turns out that it's actually easy to figure out what your zone is because it's based on something called your chronotype. And that's kind of my big thing is teaching people how to figure out what their chronotypes are. And so if you can sleep within your chronotypical swim lane, naturally you will get all of what you need in terms of your amounts of sleep.
You said they have it's a good idea for everyone to wake up at the same time every day.
Mhm.
Does it work the same way with regards to at the time that they go to sleep the night before? So they should go to sleep
Well,
around the same time and wake up around the same time?
yes and no, right? So here's the thing. I don't want to tell people, look, you can't go out and stay out a little bit later and go to the movies with somebody that you want to, or, go have, time with somebody and hang out with somebody a little bit later than normal. But kind of, don't make it a habit of staying up late because, like, again, you're not setting yourself up for productivity emotionally, physically, financially, in any way, shape, or form. If you're meeting the next day, sleepy, groggy, not able to pay attention,
Mm.
all of those things, which will happen because of you shifting your circadian rhythms. That's why if you just did one thing and make that consistent, it really has effects on everything. Also, people don't understand, but when you regularize your sleep schedule, you regularize your entire circadian rhythm. There are over 300 rhythms in your body. So there's a digestion rhythm, there's a rhythm for your kidneys, there's a rhythm for your liver. And so when all of it gets into a pattern, that's when the body works its best. And that's when your body's most efficient. And so by being able to follow a regularized sleep schedule, you end up affecting a lot of areas that you'd be surprised. We see this happen a lot, for example, with refractory hypertension. So
Mm.
this is very common in men where they have high blood pressure that medication just doesn't work on, right?
Mm.
And a lot of people don't know what to do. When we put these men through home-based sleep studies, so they don't even have to go into the lab. What we find is like almost, I think it's 86 or 87% of them have obstructive sleep apnea. As soon as we treat this obstructive sleep apnea, boom, not only the hypertension is not only treatable by medication, but most of them don't even need it because we treated the sleep apnea and that's what was leading
Mm.
to the high blood pressure. So, and that's an example of quality of sleep, right? Again, if you're not getting the quality of sleep, your body is not acting efficiently. Therefore, all of those things are not kind of moving in sync in the way they should. Sorry,
Lovely.
long-winded answer.
No, I love it. Please. Is there wiggle room with that wake up time? So I'll tell you, from Monday to Friday, I wake up pretty much, you know, at the same time. Maybe on Saturdays an hour later. I still wake up really early, but it's an hour later.
Yeah.
Sundays is so does that make a difference, or you should try to? what's the wiggle room there, if any, that you
Yeah,
know of?
I'd say the wiggle room, if any, is probably 15 minutes, 20 minutes.
Oh wow, it's not much.
It's really not. Well,
Not
because if you think
much.
about it, full sleep cycle is 90 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so if you spend an hour, that's 2/3 of a full sleep cycle difference. That
Mm-hmm.
feels like enough to knock off your circadian rhythm. But 20 minutes, which would be 1/3 of a sleep cycle, doesn't feel like enough to that push, your circadian rhythm off. That's kind of my logic there.
Wow. So regardless at what time you go to bed, ideally you should try to go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time. But
Yeah.
let's say you go to bed 2 hours later, still wake up at the same time the
Yeah,
next
but
day.
I would say one thing here, Gio, is the lower level limit is 5.5 hours. Okay,
Okay.
so because we don't want people, and if you by the way, if you only sleep 5.5 hours, don't drive, right? So not a wise idea to get behind the wheel of a car. Your reaction
That's
time
I
will be
that's a
slow.
lot of people I know.
Yeah, no, it's
That's
a
a
bad
lot of
idea.
people I know that sleep,
Yeah.
5-hour nights and are driving. Wow.
Yeah, no. I mean, the data is very consistent. If you sleep 5 hours a night, you are driving like you're blowing, like I think it's a 0.08 drunk.
Wow. Yeah. I have to say, for someone that a New Yorker, B,
Hmm?
does many things, a lot of things, 3 kids, on my Aura ring, I average, and so the Aura ring tells you the amount of time you've been in bed
Hmm?
versus the amount of time that you're actually sleeping.
Right, right, right.
And I sleep 6.5 hours. I'm actually pretty proud about that
Good.
for
That's awesome.
the kind of life that I have and all the things that I do.
Yeah.
And you know what? I think that I just prioritize it. Honestly, I don't play games with my sleep. I think
Yeah.
if we can develop that, if the audience, those that are listening, could create a habit of just prioritizing. I think, yes, some people have serious insomnia. Yes, their sleep.
Right.
There's some sleep disturbances and issues and dysfunction that occurs that's clinical. But I think for most
Right.
of us, is if we just, particularly men,
Yeah.
men still have this attitude, Michael. You know this well. I mean, I'll sleep when I die. I don't got time to
Yeah.
sleep. I need to
Right.
produce and
Absolutely.
blah blah blah. And I think
Yep.
that's a short term view, right? That I think in the long,
Well,
they'll be more productive for a
mhm.
longer period of time, and
Yeah.
everything they want to achieve, they can achieve if they value and prioritize sleep.
Well, I'll tell you my story and you decide.
Mm.
Okay. So you've known me for a long time.
Yep.
This is pre-COVID.
Mm.
We're going back now 8 years or so. Maybe
Mm.
now, maybe 8 years. So I was burning the candle at every possible end. I was lecturing as much as I possibly could. I had 2 kids who were going to college. I was trying to really buckle down. We were renting, we didn't own. I was living in California, super expensive. And really, I took every single opportunity that I could. And I worked out all the time. That's how I relieved my stress. So after my lectures, when I was all amped up, I'd get on the treadmill and I'd run for an hour, straight, all out, the whole thing. And I eventually, over the course of not that much time, and I was intermittent fasting on top of it all because I was like, why not? And, I really whacked out my electrolytes and I ended up having a cardiac event in a restaurant with my wife right there. Thankfully, I was with two physicians who were with us at dinner, and one of them caught my head as I was passing out, and it
Mm.
was a real wake up call to me to be like, you can overdo it, right? When you do too much, and you can underdo it when you don't do enough. And you've really, life is very precious, and you just, my wife said she looked down at me and she was sure I was dead,
Mm.
and she was, I mean, it's a horrible thing to say, it was a horrible feeling, but she was sure of it, and you have an experience like that, you really start to think through what are the priorities? What are the things that I need to really think about here? And, one of them, if you're not thinking about sleep as a priority, right, and you're too busy exercising or you're too busy trying to make money or you're too busy, doing whatever, you are going to shorten your ability to do all of those things. That is a guarantee. And if you're unlucky, like I was, or actually, I should think of myself as lucky, actually, because I'm still around. But
Yep.
if you're unlucky, you can end up with a cardiac event yourself. And, if you don't pay close attention to what you're doing and too much. And also, I got to say, one other thing, G, is I've never it's so stressful out there right now.
Yeah.
Like, it is such a stressful universe right now. I mean,
Yeah.
we've got the terrorism,
Yeah.
we've got, war, we've got, the list goes on. An election coming up. We've got climate change. I mean, all this crazy stuff. The stress is off the charts, right? And while I don't disagree with you, your four pillars are important. Stress is really affecting people's sleep, and we really need to think about how do we help people with stress, because stress really blocks sleep in a lot of ways because it
Right.
causes anxiety.
Right. So yeah, absolutely, they work hand in hand. I have incorporated actually recently because I saw that. Here I am saying, look, you got to sleep better, but actually the cause of the sleep problem oftentimes is the inability to de-stress or manage stress properly. First of all, I'm really happy you're okay right now, and thank you for sharing your story. I'm sorry that it even happened, but sometimes as men, I always say, I always say, men, we are really smart in certain areas, but we're idiots in other areas. And we need a wake up
Absolutely.
call. And the wake up call is either a prostate cancer diagnosis or a cardiac event or something to make change. You would
Yeah.
think that we would make the change,
Right.
to prevent some of these things. And the answer is that's not how we roll. So, so you attribute that event to a highly stressed life and poor sleep quality?
Absolutely, because I was shrinking my sleep. I was in, intermittent fasting. My sleep was much less than it normally should have been. I was overstressed, and my body wasn't functioning correct. And then add on top of that, I was running like 5 and 7 miles a night. Like, who does that? Like, it's stupid.
Actually,
And
a lot of people do, and a lot of executives do exactly that. They don't sleep much. There is a typical mentality of go
yeah,
adrenaline junkies, CrossFit,
right,
ultra marathons, triathlons, CEO of a company,
hmm,
3 kids.
right,
And
yeah,
I've had to have some patients pull back and say, look, this is an inconvenient truth. I love the fact that you love exercising and you have that desire, but it's affecting you negatively, not positively. Actually, your body's breaking
right.
down from the excess activity. So, wow, thank you so this is the sleep doctor actually going through his own experience, which is
Ab-
actually brings it home.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that's the thing that's important here is it's like I don't think any of us are above it,
Yep.
you know?
Yep.
Like we all have our stuff, right? And we're all trying to just kind of get through, through life and understand it. And whether we have prostate issues, whether we have whatever the issues are, we're trying to kind of figure it out and make it through reasonably unscathed, and hopefully leave behind a legacy of helping people and some children that we love and care about, and hopefully doing something great for the community, right? And when all of that is going on, it's you just start to think through these ideas of, well, what's important, and what do I need to have in order to get to some of these big goals. I would argue one is sleep, another is prostate health, right? Especially for men. So
Yeah.
like, at the end of it all, like that, those are things that if you don't think about them starting at an early age, right, then all of a sudden you're really playing catch up for a life that you could have led, that could have been much more enjoyable with much fewer complications if you just like got an exam when you should, or do the right, all the things that are have the ability to do.
And the funny thing is, the irony here is that prior to us hitting the record button,
Hmm.
you don't have to get into details, but you actually did very well after that incident. You probably took
Oh,
better
yeah.
care of yourself, and your business did really well,
Yes.
probably better than it's ever
Mhm.
done before,
Oh,
ironically,
yeah, absolutely, that's
right?
exactly what it was. Yeah, I
So,
ended up
so,
selling
so
my
you
whole
didn't
business.
this idea of go and sacrifice. Not even your business did as well as it did after you
No.
started taking better care of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I'll tell you what I did, which was kind of it's kind of funny is I just turned to my assistant and I was like, and I mean, I'm not saying everybody can do this, all right, but I just turned to her and I said, here's the deal is I'm not taking a call before 9 a.m. period. That's how it's going to work from now on. And from 7 to 9, I want you to text me at 6:45 and tell me what my schedule is for the day. And then from 7 to 9, I'm going to the gym. I'm not answering emails. And then I'm going to hit the sauna. And then at 9 o'clock, when I hit the desk, I'm going to be ready to roll. We're going to do 20-minute catch up, and so then business starts at like 9:20. Right. I said every 2.5 hours, you put in these 15 minutes breaks for me. I get an hour lunch every day, and you can't move any of this, right? This is the structure. And it all of the sudden, I had scheduled in things for myself that became really important, right? And then all of a sudden I said to myself, you know what? I've got these meetings back to back. Instead of having half an hour meetings, I'm going to have 25-minute meetings and then 5 minutes to write down notes from the previous meeting, because otherwise things are getting jumbled in my head. I mean, there's only so much I can remember, that kind of stuff, right? And so now, then I talked to her and I said, okay, now make these meetings. Then I was like, you know what? I think we could fit all of this into 4 days. I said, let's just take Fridays off. And she was like, I'm up for that.
Wow, that's
And
great.
all of a sudden, my Fridays were off, and we just didn't schedule me on Fridays, right? And all of this, and yet I was as productive as I had ever been,
Sure.
if not more so, right?
Sure.
Because I had this structure that also allowed me to really take care of my stress in a very unique way, which ended up being super helpful for me.
Love it. I think so many people are going to benefit from that information. I think that the strong takeaway there is that, first of all, when you are on the daily grind, you don't have an opportunity to even think what's best for you, what's a better approach, how to schedule things differently, health. You're just not thinking. And I think you
Nope.
need time away and sometimes I'm not kidding. Look, I had a patient who had a renal failure. He was in a hospital. This is a principal
Ooh.
of a school, hospital for a week. His sister comes to see him and says, Paul, my goodness, she's crying. I never seen you like this. I can't believe that you are here and that, your renal failure, you almost came came close to dying.
Right.
He looks at her, he says, honey, I am doing just fine right here in the hospital, hospitalized. This is the first time he's had a
Right.
stress-free moment
I bet.
and time to think and kind of
Yeah.
unapologetically guilt-free. So the idea is, for those that are listening, don't wait for that to happen. Take the time off are you doing things in the most efficient way, in a way that is conducive to your health? And what are your health goals? Those are really important questions. What do you value? I think good relationships with family members and kids does have an effect on health. Actually, if it's a good relationship, it's a positive effect. So those kinds of things. Michael, back to this idea of, after a certain age, it's just the nature. You're going to sleep less, and you're going to have less sleep, less REM. Is that nature, nurture? Are there some cultures around the world where they don't live in our type of society, where older people still get 50% deep and REM? Or can
So,
we do anything about that? Should we do anything about that? What's the deal?
so it's a fair question. In less industrialized societies, yes, they do have they still keep large amounts of these amounts of sleep where, they don't have running water and lights and blah, 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 blah. But we're not talking about that. Here are the biggest things that we can do to help with sleep is caffeine. It's the dirty word of all of sleep, but at the end of the day, it has zero nutritional value and we just don't need it. And it does have an effect on sleep, not only falling asleep, but the quality of the sleep. Your what's called arousal threshold is directly affected by how much caffeine you have in your system. Also, some people are fast caffeine metabolizers, some are slow caffeine metabolizers. Caffeine has a half-life of between 6 and 8 hours. So half of the amount is still in your system 8 hours later. The quarter life is 12 hours. So that cup of coffee at noon, that fourth cup of coffee at noon that you have, is still wandering around your brain at midnight, right? So at the end of it all, if you could eliminate caffeine from your system. But please don't do it all at once. Do not go cold turkey. I've had 2 patients end up in the ER. Not a good idea.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. One couldn't stop throwing up. Oh, it was awful. Just awful. So be careful, kind of fade the caffeine out of your system, like taper it down over time. But if you can get caffeine out, I think that's a really good one. And then to be fair, it's alcohol. So many people use alcohol as a sleep aid. It's the number one sleep aid in the world, actually. And it's just, while it does make you feel sleepy, to be fair, it just destroys deep sleep, which is that physical restoration, which is the thing that all of us really need to get
You
plenty
just
of.
don't
And
get
so,
there with you just
yeah.
don't get there. So how long before bedtime should we have our last drink if we're going to
Yeah.
drink?
So here's how I tell people is here's how my rule kind of works is you want to limit yourself to 2 drinks and you want to quit by 3 hours before lights out. So here's how it would work is if you go to dinner at, let's say, 6:30, 7 o'clock, right? Have your first glass of wine. Second glass of wine comes in around 7:30. You're done at 8. Okay. In between each of those glasses of wine, have a glass of water, simply because you should really be replacing fluids. Alcohol is a diuretic. You're going to have to start peeing anyway. You might as well start to flush it out. Then you've stopped at 8. You're going to bed at 11. That's 3 hours. You're good to go. It's not going to have a big effect on your sleep
Mm-hmm.
whatsoever because it takes the average human about 1 hour per alcoholic beverage.
And is there anything we can do in between? I know you said water, but for example, I know when I drink, not a heavy drinker at all, but
Mm-hmm.
I want to wake up fresh. My goal is to wake up fresh in the morning, regardless. That's
Yeah.
my goal.
So
So I
you've
have,
got to hydrate. That
yeah,
is one of the biggest
I take
factors.
when I say so when I hydrate, I do it with electrolytes, not just H2O.
Yeah,
Is there a
absolutely.
benefit there?
There is a benefit there. The big things that you're losing is vitamin B and zinc with the alcohol. And so, and that's usually in with the electrolytes as well. So, if you can get that going in you, it's always going to work well. I personally think that 2 Advil is never a bad idea.
Really?
I found it to be very helpful.
In terms of preventing a hangover or just for other reasons?
Both, because here's the thing is alcohol is so inflammatory to your system. If you throw a decent anti-inflammatory at it while it's kind of in there, my theory is that it lowers that level of total inflammation in there, which can be helpful for sleep. So I tell people hydrate, throw a couple Advil down your throat and, really be thoughtful. Like don't do the double whammy and drink alcohol and stay out later than normal. Okay. Like, because now you're really hurting yourself. Right.
Yeah,
So
you're
like,
killing a lot of people by saying that.
I
I mean,
get
that's
it,
what
but
people
I
that's
mean,
what
like,
people do, right?
yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, like nobody wanders into bad sleep, unannounced, right? It's like nobody like woke up one day and said, "Holy shit, I'm an insomniac now." Like, it doesn't really work that way. It's like when you do really dumb things to your sleep long enough, guess what happens? Your sleep gets messed up, Or now that's one kind of insomnia. Other types of insomnia are more anxiety provoking, right? And that's a completely different type of insomnia where people have an anxiety disorder or anxiety surrounding something like
Mm.
terrorism or pain or what have you, that can drive insomnia as well. So, there's a lot of different ways to kind of get to a sleep problem. But like, to be fair, I don't understand how anybody can sit back and think, oh, caffeine and alcohol, that's okay for my sleep. Like, come on.
Fascinating. All right, so I'm gonna tell you
Yeah.
my discussions with patients as it relates to sleep, and I'm gonna
Sure.
go one by one, and you're gonna fix the story for me a little bit. You're gonna say, "Yeah, that's good, but whatever," or "Gio, you
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
it all wrong. Your patients
Yeah.
are in trouble." You can say whatever you want. It's okay.
Sure.
Uh,
I love it.
um, so certainly you answered some of them already. So as it relates to, so I do tell them, look, it's less important in an ideal world. You get 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night, and you
Right.
go to sleep at the same time, wake up at the same time every day.
Right.
We don't live in an ideal world. We don't live in a
Correct.
natural world. So it is, if you have to choose one, go to sleep at the same time and have the same wake up time. And you mentioned
Right.
that, and that's the most important thing. So even if you're
Right.
sleeping 5 hours, sleep, go to sleep at the same time, wake up at
Consistently.
this so consistently. So that's one of the first things I say, because
Mhm.
remember, that's just sleep.
Yeah.
dietarily, I have to help them extra. So if I'm throwing too much,
Yeah. Oh no, I totally agree. You can't give
you
them
know,
too much. That's the
right,
best first thing that they can do.
right.
Guaranteed.
Second to that, we have the
Mhm.
discussion of what to eat and drink or not to eat and drink before sleep so that you can get
Right.
to deep and REM. So
Right.
make your last meal at
Mhm.
3 hours before sleep, before you go to bed.
Agreed.
Same thing with alcohol, with caffeine, not after noon. I do give some wiggle room to those that are fast metabolizers. I am
Yep.
one of them, so maybe I am biased, and so I shouldn't be biased with patients. But with fast metabolizers, for example, I can have an espresso. Well, first of all, I'm Cuban, so with that's a cultural component of having a little
Of
espresso after
course.
a meal. Don't
Yep.
always have it because there's no reason to, but I
Right.
have it when I can. And I'm going to sleep. And of course, the question is the quality of sleep.
Right.
If when I have an espresso, it's typically Friday, Saturday, where I'm going to sleep, longer than usual, which is about 6.5 hours and not 5.5 hours. My
Right.
aura ring says you got a good amount of deep. And so I guess the question is for those that, if they know that they're fast metabolizers, what's the wiggle room there? Is an espresso after a meal
Mhm.
still a bad idea?
Well,
Or like,
I
because I find
I've
it to be
seen.
complete. By the way, coffee doesn't keep me up.
Right.
I don't. If I'm tired and sleepy, coffee. Oh, drink more coffee. That doesn't do it for me. So,
Right. So it's fascinating. So I had this discussion with my own personal doctor.
mhm.
So I have a doctor when I lived in Arizona. She's still my doctor now. And she has an espresso every night before bed. Literally just knocks it back and closes her eyes. Okay. And I've given her such a hard time. I'm like, Carrie, you can't keep doing this. Like, I'm the sleep doctor. Like, you're driving me crazy, blah, blah, blah. And she said, caffeine doesn't affect me. Caffeine doesn't affect me. And I'm like, bullshit. I'm like, and so I said, let's run an enzyme panel on you and see if you have the right enzymes to actually metabolize caffeine. Because if you don't
Right.
have the enzymes, then you can't metabolize them. And then that would make perfect sense. Guess what? She doesn't have the enzymes for
Correct.
caffeine. And so it wouldn't surprise me that there might be a cultural basis to that whole idea that
Right.
would
Yeah.
come through cultures that had very heavy caffeine use because
Right.
over the course of time, your genetics, I would argue, would probably have to evolve so that you could sleep with caffeine, with amounts of caffeine in your system based on your genetic cultural history, right?
Perfect. So I do get genetic testing on patients to know these kinds of things and to know
Mhm.
what their predispositions, what they can metabolize and not. So that's right. And by the way, I don't have that enzyme either.
Yeah, see, so that's what's fascinating. Like, it's bizarre, but here's the thing. Lots of people think they don't have that enzyme,
Right.
okay?
Right.
And they do.
Right.
So go have yourself tested and figure it out because at the end of the day, like you're not like you can't fool Mother Nature, right? Like like if you put enough caffeine in your system, you're not going to sleep. And if you do sleep, the sleep you get is going to be crap. And so
Right.
at the end of the day, like you can't keep fooling it. Like caffeine is not a substitute for sleep. Doesn't work that way.
Excellent. What should a dinner look like for better
Mm.
sleep? So there's controversy there. Some people say, look, you want your carbs at night. You don't want carbs in the morning, you want carbs, but you want more carbs at night, as an example. People
Right.
that do fasting actually starts interfering with
Right.
sleep because there's a stressor. So cortisol levels rise if they're fasting for multiple days, as an
Yeah.
example. Those that do ketogenic diet, it's a stressor
Mhm.
in the body initially. They have a
In the
harder time
beginning.
sleeping. Right.
Yep.
So what's the story there? What's the
Well,
perfect dinner for best sleep?
yeah. Well, first of all, I wanted to comment that I think you're telling your patients the right thing with your numbers of when they should have what. So I wanted to
Hmm.
say yes to that.
Right.
But when you're looking at actual foods for sleep, here's the thing is it's better to look at not foods, but more macro categories. So carbohydrates, proteins, fats, things of that nature, right? And so what's going to give you energy is protein and fat. What is going to make you have more serotonin in your system, thereby making you feel more relaxed, probably even some dopamine, is going to be sugar and carbohydrates, right? And so having some sugar and carbohydrates is not the end of the universe. I mean, your body needs it and it's okay. But at the end of the day, if you're trying to follow like a ketogenic lifestyle, you will notice that it will be more difficult for you to sleep. Now, let's say you're going to be keto and you want to get great sleep. What can you do? If you up your omegas, that can be helpful. So fatty tuna, salmon, anything that's high in omegas, I think could be helpful. Also, looking at your lean meats could be another option. You can get more protein out of certain lean meats like venison or things like that. We just had this new place open up nearby called Wild Fork, and they've got like every kind of meat you could possibly
Oh,
imagine
wow.
in there.
Nice.
It's kind of bizarre. So I think that's part of it. I think timing is part of it, but also, I mean, you got to give yourself obviously the time for everything to kind of start to get through the system. But if you're trying to eat a meal to promote sleep, I think you have a better chance of knowing what not to eat than what to eat. And nobody's going to like this, but it's really all about dessert. You just shouldn't have dessert. The influx of, sugar, I mean, there's data to now show it affects melatonin production. It really is towards the end of the night, so you have no opportunity to work it off. So it goes straight to fat. Like and it sucks. Okay. Like I get it. I love ice cream. If people always say, if you were stranded on an island, you could only have one thing, what would it be? My thing would be ice cream. Okay. And it's awful, right? It really clobbers your sleep. And
It's probably because there's an insulin overproduction of insulin. It causes an inflammatory response, which studies have shown that if you take a 10-minute walk, that reduces the insulin response after a meal, or if you do something with some level of intensity, not super high level, but going up and down stairs or kettlebell swings or something, that lowers the insulin response as well. Have no idea. Would you know? I mean, in theory, that helps with sleep, because if the insulin response is the problem, then that should, in theory, help with sleep.
Absolutely, but I don't think we can give people
don't eat ice cream every night, then go for a walk and do kettlebell swings.
Okay, that's not what we're saying, folks.
Right. But I do want to. So I'm always looking for the one time that I will do that, right? So I do give my patients, and my part of my story is, here's the wiggle room. You're going to break the rules like this, and here's the best way to break the rules. So if you are going to have dessert, Thanksgiving is next week.
Yep.
Everybody, everybody's going to break the rules.
Yeah. So here's what I say is, here's where the wiggle room is. You just want to pick your poison, right? So are you staying up late to hang out with family? Are you drinking alcohol? Is the mulled cider your thing? Is it desserts? But it can't be all three. You know what I'm saying? Like, because that's really, because what ends up happening is you really blow through any sleep that you had in inventory, so to speak, which usually is none, and you really just start to deteriorate quickly, right? And so pick your poison and understand that it's cumulative, right? And so that's the other thing is you don't have to be the life of the party every night, right? So you can have a fun night and say dessert tonight, and then have a good night. And then, because holidays last for a while, at least they do at my house. And so, so just be thoughtful about that kind of stuff. And I think you'll probably do okay. Like pumpkin latte, those pumpkin spice things, like that you shouldn't consider that a season. Okay. Like that's not a good sign. Okay. But, a lot of people do, like, oh, it's pumpkin latte or pumpkin spice season. I'm like, oh my God, not good. Right. So you really got to think through some of those choices there. And I mean, the biggest thing I would say that really affects your sleep the most is snacking. So like once you're done, be done. Like that's really the biggest thing, because you just keep pushing the threshold later and later every time you enter more food to the system.
There's a good amount of research indicating higher incidences of all sorts of diseases with nighttime eating, nighttime snacking, particularly, and even with prostate cancer. So I'm wondering if that's related to poor, they just made that a correlation, but with no idea why that is. I wonder if because it's sleep disruption. Exactly. What are the best nutrients, if any, we need to get to REM and deep? That's what we're trying to accomplish. And even as we get older, we want to kind of try to get there, unless we know. Actually, I don't know that you answered the question. Nature or nurture? Why, as we get older, we have a harder time getting, or is it less important as we get older to have so much deep sleep and REM
Well,
sleep?
so deep sleep is really, remember, physical restoration. And as the body, kind of hits that certain stages, there's only so much it's going to continue to go before, the machine starts to break down. And I think that's really what's kind of starting to happen there. And in terms of that, but I mean, can you get more deep sleep as you age? Absolutely. Or can you at least maintain the deep sleep that you have as you age? Yeah, I think the
If
biggest
we're
thing is
really
being,
meticulous, Michael, really, I
yeah.
mean, this is now, I
Mhm.
want to be the LeBron James of aging,
Right.
right? I want to
Sure.
crush it. Aging is a sport. I want to train. I want to
Yep.
get, so I am, look, zero alcohol 3 hours before.
Right.
I'm really, meals are, light, and I do everything right. It-
Mhm.
you know, More likely will I get, at 60, a decent amount of deep and REM sleep.
Absolutely. Yes, you
Yeah.
would.
You just
I
have to be
think,
more consistent and
yeah,
disciplined with it. Yeah.
it's really about consistency and discipline. Look, and also I want people to understand something is, when we're talking about here, which we're talking about a lot of techniques, right? And so that falls under the category of discipline, right? So getting up at the same time, eliminate caffeine, know when to have alcohol, all these things, right? But there's also another side. It's called acceptance. Okay. Sometimes you can do everything right and you still won't sleep. All right. Because there's something else that's going on, right? The perfect example is my daughter was dating this guy a couple of years ago. He broke up with her, broke her heart, right? She's crying, very upset. I slept like shit for like 2 weeks. Okay. I did all the things you're supposed to do correctly. I'm the sleep doctor, right? But I was upset because my daughter was upset, right? Sometimes stuff just doesn't work. Okay. And there's a reason for that. What I think the reason is has to do with safety. I think if you don't feel safe, you don't sleep.
Mm.
Okay. Whatever that safety is, that could be financial safety, that could be relationship safety, that could be, I don't know, job safety. I mean, there's a million kinds of safety. But when
Health.
you're health safety, right? But when you're asleep, you're at your most vulnerable point of your 24-hour cycle. If you don't feel safe, I don't think you get to REM and deep sleep. Okay. And so the safer you feel, the easier it is for your body to get you there. Right. And so if you think you have apnea, get it diagnosed and get it treated, because when you're cutting off your air because of sleep apnea, your brain doesn't feel safe. And so it wakes you up. Right. Like that's a physiological manifestation
Yeah.
of it. If you're worried about your daughter, then you've got an emotional manifestation. Right. And I think that's what happens to us. And we have to be able to accept in the moment, in the middle of the night, and say, well, I guess my body doesn't want to sleep right now, and that's okay. Like my head's not going to pop off. Like it's not like this has never happened before, right? Like it's
Mm.
not like this is some new situation that, oh my God, my arm is going to come flying off my body. No, it's okay. I might be staying up a little bit longer tonight than I would have hoped, right? You getting pissed off about it is going in the opposite direction of helping the situation,
Mm.
okay? Because all you're doing is jacking up your heart rate, which is icking up your autonomic nervous system, which means you ain't sleeping because you want your sympathetic, not your parasympathetic. I mean, you want your parasympathetic, not your sympathetic kicking in.
Gotcha. Michael, when
So,
those days that you're having sleep issues, is there such thing as paying back your sleep debt, or is that done? You can
uh,
never really pay, or is it because people are so people are stressing because they feel like, wow, I had 10 years of sleep
yeah,
deprivation, I could never pay that back, that sleep
right,
debt back, so that I'm done, and then they're stressed over that, so they don't sleep.
yeah,
So
yeah.
what's that
I
about?
would say that's just dumb.
Uh-huh.
Okay, like at the end of it all, your body knows how to absorb a lot of pain, physical, emotional, all of this stuff. It absorbs a lot of that sleep deprivation. I'll tell you where we see it really come through the worst is with shift workers.
Mm.
So if I've got somebody who shows up in my office and they say 25 years on the night shift, I know there's going to be all kinds of issues and some of which are just not going to be movable, right? And so those are the ones that I think are really where we see that what would be a nurture has a bigger effect than nature, right, on those types of people. But People can be born genetically crappy sleepers. And so then we have to say, okay, let's look at everything around and make sure all of that other stuff is good, because we know you're a crappy sleeper anyway. Let's not make it worse.
Shift workers, I really highly encourage them to figure out how to have a normal work schedule, higher
It's just not
predisposition to
good.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Any
not healthy.
any nutrients
So I'll
that
tell you what
you
I
know
think.
of
I
that
think
helps you get to deep and
yes. Yeah. I
REM?
know you're gonna pound me on this one, so I'm gonna give it to you. So magnesium, yes.
What kind?
Vitamin.
Threonate, citrate,
I like to start with glycinate because it's easier on the belly.
right.
And then if that is working for them, I then try to transition them to threonate because that's got a little bit more supportive data for sleep.
Yeah,
Those are
and
the two
crosses the
that I
blood-brain
like.
barrier better than the others.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that because we all know most people are deficient in magnesium.
Yeah.
I like vitamin D because most people are deficient in that as well. Well, let me back up. When somebody shows up and says, Michael, I want a supplement for sleep, I say, go get some blood work and let's fix your deficiencies first. So that's how I always do it. So if they have a magnesium deficiency, that's when we're looking at magnesium. If it's vitamin D, then I'm putting them on anywhere from 2,000 to 5,000 international units a day. And we see if we can get that up there. I look at iron, specifically ferritin, because that can have all kinds of restless leg feelings to it, and it needs to be above 60. Especially in my female patients, I see a lot of weird iron deficiencies that kind of go on there. And then the final thing is if it feels like they're a shift worker, or if it feels like their sleep is really wonky, or they're super stressed at night, I'll do a melatonin cortisol saliva test.
Right. Tell me about melatonin. A lot of people are just using melatonin randomly,
Really stupid idea. So look, melatonin is a hormone. Like I don't know why people don't get this. Like it's the same reason we prescribe testosterone and estrogen is the same reason why we should be prescribing melatonin. And by the way, if you go outside the United States, it is by prescription only. And yes, there are instances where melatonin makes sense. Jet lag, shift work, and then people over age 60 or so, when we start to see a melatonin decline, it makes perfect sense to get those folks back on melatonin. So if you're wondering how do we get deep sleep as we age, keep up on your melatonin. Make sure that if you have a deficiency, it's being addressed, would be number one. Now, to be fair, lots of people are using melatonin that don't need melatonin, and most people are overdosing on melatonin. The appropriate dose is somewhere between 0.5 and 1.5 milligrams, right? Most people can't find it in anything but 3s, 5s, and 10s. Right. And people are giving it to their kids. Like, once again, this is a hormone. Like, I'm not giving hormones to kids, okay? Like, that seems like a really stupid idea, right? But yet there's tons of pediatricians out there who are like, sure, give your kid melatonin to help them sleep. By the way, you just taught your child that they need a pill to sleep. I'm not sure you really want to be doing something like that, right? As long-term behavioral consequences of something like that are probably pretty immense, right? So like, again, people are not being thoughtful. Also, one thing that people don't know is at high dosages, melatonin is actually a contraceptive. People don't realize that, right? And so again, would you want to be giving a contraceptive to a young female developing body where that wasn't a requirement? No, I'm pretty sure you don't want to do that. So I think people need to really be thoughtful when they're taking this. Plus, the other thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is it affects other medications. It affects antidepressants, diabetes medications, and blood pressure medications because it's a circadian pacemaker, right? And like, you need those things to work when you put them in at a certain time, not, you know what I'm saying? So like at the end of the day, like people are just not thoughtful when it comes to melatonin because you can walk into the local drugstore and pull it off the shelf and pop it in your mouth.
Honestly, a lot of practitioners are prescribing it.
And they don't know what
prescribe it to pilots who are traveling at different time zones.
Pilots make sense.
And
Pilot makes sense. So now I will say that don't forget, melatonin is a hell of an antioxidant.
Correct. And because of that, likely there's a lot of literature showing there's anti-cancer activity with it, probably because of an antioxidant benefit. So in guys with high risk prostate cancer, they're on some chemotherapeutic drug, which that alone interferes with their sleep. Those situations.
That makes sense. Yeah. Right. I'd have that person on melatonin. It'd probably be a pretty decent dose. Right. So, like, again, at the end of the day, it's going to be more situational. Now, I will tell you there is one group of children that melatonin is appropriate in, and it's kids on the autism spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of data to show that those kids do well on like 3 and 4 milligrams of melatonin. But again, you need to be thoughtful about what you're doing. And by the way, don't dose your kids with Benadryl either. Okay, like
For
that's not a
sleep.
great idea for sleep. Right?
Mm-hmm.
They have allergies. Yeah, great allergies. The doctor tells you to give your kid Benadryl during allergy season. Fine. But at the end of the day, if
So
you're giving your
parents
kid
do that,
Benadryl,
right? Parents do give their kids Benadryl for sleep.
absolutely,
They never get, so
absolutely,
they never, so it knocks them, it's like alcohol. It knocks them out, but they never get to their phases of sleep.
no, exactly.
Excellent.
Bad idea.
Last question, I think. How do
Okay.
you know, how does one learn what's their chronotype?
So easy. You go to my chrono quiz at chronoquiz.com and you figure it out. But there's a couple of different ways you figure it out. And so I've developed a questionnaire that you can take online. I recommend that people do that. It's fun. It's easy. It's free. Now you can also look at your own genetics. So believe it or not, it's kind of inside 23andMe. So if you've got 23andMe, you can look. They used to have a report on morningness and eveningness. That gives you kind of an idea of chronotype, not as refined as my 4 types. They've pretty much only got 2 types there.
How do we
Look at
get
your
yours,
parents.
Michael?
Say again.
How do we get your questionnaire?
Chronoquiz.com.
Excellent. Okay, great.
Yeah. Yeah. Also look at your genetics. This is a genetic thing. So I tell people all the time, I remember when I was like 9 years old, I'd walk into my parents' bedroom at 10 o'clock. I was an only child, so I was always up wandering around. And both my parents were wide awake at 10, 11, 12. It was nothing. My dad would be reading a book and my mom might be watching television, but we were all night owls. And I've been a night owl almost my whole life, and I married a night owl. So it worked out okay.
How do you work? How do night owls, speaking of night owls,
Hmm.
get good quality sleep? What do they have to
It is
do?
not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy at all because a lot of times you're waking up before your body wants to wake up. And so your
Mm,
body continues to produce a lot of that sleep related hormones while you're
mm.
awake, which makes you feel groggy and logy and lazy and makes mornings terrible. And you get into fights with your parents and all that kind of fun stuff. So it's hard to do that. Now, what are we starting to see? We are starting to see some variability in school start times, which we have started to see, which is not happening fast enough, but we are starting to see it. I get a lot of kids to take naps when they come home from school, and that can be super duper helpful because most high schoolers are night owls. That's the thing that most people don't realize, that it's biological. I wish I could tell you it didn't happen, but it does. And especially boys. And I'd say 70 to 80% of boys usually become night owls during high school. And it's just hell to wake them up in the morning.
Nature, nurture. Once again, for example,
Sure.
yeah, nature. Okay.
Nature.
So
Yeah, it's
this is what
biology. It's just what
biology.
happens. I wish I could tell you why. We don't really know exactly yet. We think it
Can
has
we
something
fight
to do with
against it? I
puberty.
mean, in other words, I have 2 older girls, 1 younger son. He's only 11, but we're thinking ahead, and it's like, okay, no,
Yeah.
listen, you got to shut everything down. Obviously, I don't think technology helps. It keeps them
Yeah.
wound up.
Yeah. No, engagement doesn't help.
Yeah,
Okay. Like I tell people all the time, you need runway to land the plane. Okay. Right. And so, if you're playing, Lords of War, whatever game you're playing,
right,
like you're
exactly.
not trying to fall asleep. Okay. Like, come on. Like if you're scrolling through Facebook looking at all your friends, you're not trying to fall asleep. Like relax. Like, and if you want to watch television, I don't give a shit. Watch television. But I know what's going to happen. Set the timer, close your eyes, and listen to it because it'll be just enough of a distraction so that you don't get monkey mind and start thinking about all the stuff you should have said and should have done today, and then you'll fall asleep, right?
Mm.
Like just be practical about all of this, right? I mean,
Isn't
that's
that
what
the
I
time when they're teenagers that they need a lot because their body's developing and they need so much,
yeah, dude,
but
their
it's just
frontal lobe isn't fully developed until they're 25. Come on. They need as much sleep as they can get. And they don't get a lot of it because of devices, because of, too much Adderall in the world. I mean, caffeine, like the list goes on and on.
wow. All right. Final thoughts, Dr. Michael Breus. Final thoughts. So
Here's what I'll tell you.
the audience is mostly men here. A
Yep.
lot of them, throughout different ages, a lot of middle age to senior men that are listening. What do
Yep.
they need to do?
So here's what I'll tell you is number one, If you snore and somebody says that they think they hear you stop breathing even once, do yourself a favor and get a sleep apnea test. You can do it at home. You don't have to go into a hospital to do it.
How do you do it at home?
Actually, if you go to my website at thesleepdoctor.com, we sell them. They're like $180.
Great.
So it's not super expensive. It's really more of a yes or a no. And it lets you know if you've got it. It gives you some information about severity, which is helpful. But if you think you've got it, get tested. There are multitudes of treatments out there. It's not everybody ends up on a CPAP machine. And if you've got it and you answer that question, so many other things for your health will probably fall in line in a positive way. And I think that helps with longevity. That helps with sexual function. That helps with, cognitive function, like all of the above. So if you think you could have sleep apnea, or if somebody has heard your snoring start and stop, do yourself a favor and get tested. It's $180 or $190. Like, it's not going to kill you.
Good.
So that's number one. Number two, regularize your sleep schedule. Wake up at the same time 7 days a week. It doesn't have to start all at once. You can just try to do it 6 days a week. Just try to keep your work schedule so that you wake up at roughly the same time on Saturday and give yourself an extra hour to sleep in on Sunday. I don't care. Just get yourself there over the course of a month, let's say. If you need
What's
to rip
the
the
latest
Band-Aid,
you can wake up allowed?
1 hour later.
And so what's a good
And then
time?
start
So
chopping it.
can anybody waking up at 10 a.m. every morning? Is that still okay? Or is there,
They
just
normally
wake up
wake
at
up
the
at
same
9.
time?
Yeah, just it's same time, whatever. If you don't go to bed till 2 and you can wake up at 10 and your boss doesn't shoot you, that's great, right?
Great.
But keep it consistent. Consistency breeds better quality sleep across the board, okay?
Just like
And then,
exercise, actually.
yeah, right, as does exercise.
Yeah, exercise. The line is consistency is more important than intensity in my
Yes.
world. Yeah.
And I agree with that. I think mobility really is the third one, which is if you stay mobile, you will sleep better, right? It's just because you're not in pain, you're not becoming more frail, your body is active and it requires sleep. If you don't do shit, your body doesn't want to sleep, okay?
Yeah.
It's like, like if you don't get out and are active, your body doesn't need to recover, not nearly as much. And so that affects you. And so staying active allows your body to recover. I'm not saying go to exhaustion. I'm saying be active, have purpose, get involved, have community, and, talk to people, get out there, do the things you want to do, walk, work out, swim, bicycle, whatever it is, walk your dog. I don't care. Just do something to be part of a community and thrive. That's how we live longer as healthy men. That's how we have purpose in our lives, is to be able to, contribute. And so getting a good night's sleep just helps you contribute in whatever way, shape, and form you want to.
Blue light glasses. I wanted to impress you I couldn't find mine. I wanted to impress you and wear them, but I couldn't find mine.
So
Should we wear them? If so, when?
Here's the thing. Nobody's curing their insomnia with blue light blocking glasses, okay? I want to be super clear about that. I use mine when I travel, because if I'm traveling to another country, I can limit the sunlight exposure, which helps me adapt quicker so I don't get jet lag. So I find them to be very useful for when I'm traveling. But other than that, no, I'm not wearing them on a regular basis. Could you, and would they be helpful? Yes. Do I personally do it? No.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I see some people wearing them all the time. I was like, is that your look cool approach?
I don't know what they're doing. Like Dave Asprey wears them all the time. And I'm always like, Dave, that's stupid. What are you doing?
Michael, and this is really the last question, and thank you so much for all the information you shared with us. How do we know who like, we even have a mutual friend who seems to have like real insomnia. Like how do we know that the inability to sleep properly and they self-diagnose with insomnia is just a matter of creating new habits and doing new things versus no, this is serious, real insomnia?
Well, to be super fair, that's why people come to me. And so I make that judgment call, and then I will oftentimes enroll them into like significant cognitive behavioral therapy, where we have a very highly focused approach. I still see patients and I like this kind of work. It's very structured. People meet with me weekly. They keep a sleep diary. I have an Oura ring on them. If they're currently using sleeping pills, I work with their physician, we taper them off the sleeping pills and we put them on better sleeping habits. I base it all on their chronotype and their sleep cycles, which I catch through their Aura ring. It's all very performance based. We also then enforce meditation, relaxation. We teach them breathing so that way they know what to do to be able to help them fall asleep at night. They understand the metrics to look at and when not to look at them too much. And then we have a morning routine that helps them wake up in the morning without having the need for caffeine. We get them usually down to one caffeinated beverage a day, and then everybody's rocking and rolling.
Is there ever a time, so even for prostate problems, I'm a natural guy, I do all natural.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'm like, you need a little Flomax. You need a little Flomax,
Mm-hmm.
and it helps.
Yeah.
Is there ever a time where
Absolutely.
someone needs a medication like Ambien or whatever for sleep?
Absolutely. I mean, so I want to be super clear. Like, number one, medications are good and important. I think medications can do a great job of breaking the cycle of insomnia, but some people unfortunately got stuck on medications. I have patients that show up have been on Ambien for 18 years. Like that happens all the time. Now, to be fair, if nothing's going wrong, I'm not so sure that's the worst thing in the universe. I will tell you that if you take Ambien for extended periods of time, you will have cognitive decline. There's no question about it. Like, I mean, to be clear, you are doing all kinds of things to your brain chemistry. You have to expect that you will have cognitive decline. If that is a big important factor for you, then no, you probably shouldn't be taking sleeping pills for extended periods of time. I want to be clear about something else. I am not your doctor, okay? Do not just all of a sudden rip yourself off your sleeping pills. That is a conversation between you and your doctor. And you need to be able to express to your doctor, hey, I'm comfortable on this, or hey, I think I've been on this too long, or hey, I'd like to come off. How do we go about doing something like that? That's usually where people like me come in, where I work with, physicians. We come up with a very gradual taper schedule and we get people off of it. Now, I'll tell you this, when we break the cycle of insomnia, it's never taken less than 3 months on drug ever. So we have to keep people on drug for several kind of cycles through their insomnia, because insomnia is a bitch. Like it just goes and goes. And it's not 30 days on a drug. At least that's never been my experience. I've never gotten somebody to sleep well in less than 3 months. And that's putting them on drug for 3 months and then having to taper them off for about 6 weeks.
Awesome. Dr. Michael Breus, thank you so much for being on, brother. Wow, this was, I wouldn't say a masterclass because it's like, an hour and 10 minutes, but man, there's a lot of great information here. Thank you so much for being on, brother.
Hey, it's my pleasure. I'm super excited to have had the opportunity to be here. And people should know that I refer patients to Dr. Gio. Like he's my guy. He's my go-to guy for all of this type of stuff. So you're listening to the master for sure. And thanks again for having me on the show. By the way, if people want to get in touch with me, Dr. Gio knows how. He can get you my email personally or swing by the website, thesleepdoctor.com. You can see kind of some of the fun stuff we're doing there.
Excellent. It'll be in our sleep notes. Thanks so much, Michael. Everyone, have a great day or a pleasant night and stay safe and stay healthy. All the best. See you next time.
Sweet dreams.
Sweet dreams. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Dr. Gio podcast. You can watch all episodes of this podcast and much more by subscribing to my YouTube channel on youtube.com/Gio Espinoza ND. If you love what you heard today, you can help by leaving a 5-star review of the podcast on Apple and Spotify, as each review helps us reach more men who are serious about improving their urological health and how to function better with age. And for the latest research and actionable takeaways in the world of men's health and integrative urology, sign up for my newsletter at drgio.com. I'll see you next time.